Good afternoon, and welcome to our webcast titled Women, Money, Aging, Part 2. We're glad you could join us today. This webcast is being recorded, and we want it to be interactive, and so feel free to ask questions. To do so, you just need to move your hand around on your mouse, and the Q&A feature will appear at the bottom of your screen. Use it liberally, and we'll be happy to have the questions come in. I would like to now turn it over to Claire McHenry from Nebraska, who is co-chair of NASAA's Senior Issues Committee. Claire, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to part 2 of a series of webcasts from the NASA Seniors Issue Committee that focuses on women, aging, and money. Last week in part 1 of the series, we heard from experts as they explored vulnerabilities women experience as they age, financial issues particular to women, and characteristics of women investors. Women can experience unique financial challenges, including lower lifetime income from wage gaps and less time in the workforce, longer life expectancies, increased risk of dementia, and lower rates of confidence when investing, all of which can be barriers to women achieving their financial goals. For decades, wealth management has been a male-dominated field, both in terms of who are the financial advisors, but also who is making financial decisions. According to a 2020 McKinsey & Company report, women control only about a third of U.S. household financial assets, about $10 trillion. However, as the boomer generation continues to age, the report also expects that women will control much of the $30 trillion in financial assets by 2030. All of this impacts the kind of financial services women need as they age, the gaps that women have in meeting their financial goals, how women want to engage with their financial advisors, how the financial industry is responding to these concerns. In today's panel, Kirsten Madsen, Interim Deputy Securities Commissioner of the Office of the Montana State Auditor, will lead a discussion on how the financial industry is responding to women as they age. Joining Kirsten in this discussion are Vanessa Okawaiwe and Jackie Larson. Vanessa is principal and a thought leader at Edward Jones and frequently speaks at conferences on topics of financial wellness, financial inclusion across communities, and workplace diversity. Jackie is Senior Vice President and part of the West Side Group of RBC Wealth Management. She is branch manager of the Minnetonka branch in Minnesota, and she is president of the Women's Association of Financial Advisors at RBC. Kirsten, I'll hand it off to you.
Kirsten, you're muted.
Well, step 1, make a tech error. Check. Thank you, Claire. Like many of you who are here today, I can think of examples from my own life where I've seen some of these issues that are facing women who I love and know personally, right? A coworker who's experiencing a late in life divorce, or an aunt who was suddenly widowed and for the first time is managing their family finances at a completely different level, and in some cases for the very first time. Personally, friends who are haven't been receiving messaging about investing because it wasn't designed to reach a particular generation. And so they're lacking confidence in what to do with their own financial plan. Even parents and grandparents, seeing someone we love experience dementia, or being the caregiver for that and seeing the weight that that takes on women. Today's panel is going to turn this ongoing discussion by the NASA Senior Issues Committee to what industry is doing and explore how financial institutions are responding to the financial issues that are facing women as they age. Our discussion is going to involve 2 segments followed by a Q&A. Our first segment will address what regulated industry has learned about the financial picture facing women as they age, including the impacts of caregiving throughout their lives, a greater reliance on Social Security, the impacts of scams, just as some examples. In our second half, we'll discuss the opportunities that firms and advisors have identified where they can help women clients prepare to protect themselves financially. As James stated, we'll have a Q&A feature. The chat is turned off, except if you're trying to reach one of us directly. Please use the Q&A feature. We'll be happy to answer those at the end. So with that, I'd like to start by hearing some initial thoughts from each of our guests. Vanessa, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten, and good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am really excited to be part of this discussion today. At Edward Jones, we always say that our purpose is to partner with our clients and with our colleagues to have that positive impact on their lives, on the lives of our our communities, and just as a result, help make society a lot better. And an outcome, I would say, of having that purpose is to make sure that our clients can retire with dignity. And I do believe that that's something that all of us would like to ensure happens to us and to our loved ones. One of the things that we do see, as both Claire and Kirsten have pointed out, is that women do go through some unique circumstances over the course of their lives, whether it is having the longer life expectancy, the lower earnings, and as a result of the lower earnings, having less money in Social Security, having less retirement income, and as a result of that, experiencing financial insecurity. So one of the things, of course, we're going to discuss today is really what solutions can we put in place in the early years, and sequence them right, so that when women age and get older, there's confidence in their retirement and in the fact that they have got all these things in place to ensure that they do retire with dignity. So I'm excited to be part of this discussion. The other thing I would mention, Kirsten, you talked about women being more likely to experience dementia. At Edward Jones, we've had this almost 10-year partnership with the National Association of Alzheimer's, because we know that that is a disease that does destroy not just people's health, but their wealth, and it impacts their well-being, the well-being of their loved ones. So that's a partnership that we've been involved in for several years, because we know that finding a cure to that horrible disease is something that will positively impact the lives of everyone, and especially women, who happen to be the bulk of caregivers. So again, looking forward to the discussion this morning.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Jackie.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for having me as well. As stated earlier, I'm a financial advisor first and foremost, but also a branch director, and I've been fortunate enough to been asked to be the president of our women's organization at RBC. And this whole topic that we're talking about today is kind of near and dear to my heart, as I had two grandmothers. One lived to be 98 and the other 103. So I do know the impact of longevity, and clearly I have kind of realigned my financial plan to take into consideration that there might be some longevity, hopefully, in my lifetime. But, I think this whole topic is something that we need to have a lot more education, discussion. Firms need to be focusing on how do we support our advisors so that ultimately we can support our clients. I think that, education around finances hasn't necessarily been a focus. And interestingly enough, I've had a couple of just sightings of, the 10 things I wish I would have learned earlier. And these are successful women, but money management was one of them. So that made me really think that, the more that we can educate, our clients, our societies, our communities about how to handle some of these issues that are facing our aging population, and more specifically today, women, because as we know, and was mentioned earlier by Claire, women are starting to control more of the wealth. And as the population continues to age and women have a tendency to live a little bit longer than our male counterparts, they're going to continue to start controlling more. And so it's having those really thoughtful, meaningful discussions with our women clients to make sure that they feel empowered and supported, so that we can kind of take that financial burden off of them, or at least share some of that with them, so they can really focus on the things in life that are important to them. And that would be their, health, their family, their community, and quite frankly, their legacy.
Thanks so much, Jackie. For the first part of this discussion, we're going to talk about some of what your industry itself already knows about what senior women are facing. And Vanessa, I know that Edward Jones has done some work around this so-called sandwich generation and the impact that caregiving responsibilities have on the financial picture that's facing women. I wonder if you could tell us more about that.
Yes, of course. Oh, I thought my audio went for a second there. Yes, I'm sure, Kirsten. So this was an interesting study that we did a few months ago, as you said, about women in the sandwich generation. And I know, we all know that this refers to women who are either taking care of younger or taking care of both younger family members, children, and older relatives. So whether that's parents or, close family friends, and they're right smack bang in the middle, maybe in full-time jobs, and also being the key caregiver. So we wanted to understand a bit more deeply about what challenges these women are facing and what their unique situations are. And as we all know, women tend to be the majority of caregivers, whether that's unpaid or paid caregiving. 70% of paid caregivers in the US are women. And it's a similar situation when it comes to women who are unpaid caregivers. And so what the study showed, interestingly enough, was that almost 64% of women felt that they weren't able to build wealth as a result of the responsibilities they had as caregivers. And almost close to 60% of them had shown that they had taken steps back professionally, reduced their hours, gone part-time in order to fulfill duties as caregivers. And of course, the resulting impact is that they have less money going into their retirement plans, less emergency funds compared to their male counterparts. And for me, what stood out is that the younger generation, so think about Gen Zers and the millennials, we're seeing an average of 36% of them opting out of the workforce or reducing their hours significantly in order to focus on caregiving. So it's really important that we look at what solutions we as the financial services industry can proffer in the early stages in order to ensure that women have better outcomes financially. Because whilst we're seeing a reduction or a narrowing in the wage gap right now. So as of 2024, women were earning about 85% of what their male counterparts were earning, which is a significant improvement from what we saw 20 years ago, where it was around 81%. So the wage gap is narrowing, and even more so for the younger generation, which is a great thing. However, when we look at what's happening with younger female caregivers, they are stepping out of the workforce in order to fulfill those duties. And as I said, they're having an impact on retirement planning and ultimately just creating wealth for themselves and their family. The other thing that study just pointed out, which is something we know already, is that these women are likely to be facing undue stress, which will also have an impact not just on their finances, but also on their health and general well-being. And so they're in this difficult stage of making tough decisions about their wealth. We found that ultimately the loss to wages and benefits for women annually when they do step out of the workforce is over $300,000. So you could think about what that impacts, right? Yes, it's significant. What does that impact have ultimately on retirement? As we've discussed, women are living on average 6 years longer than men. And so this study gave us just more insights into what solutions we can offer, which is how do we ensure that women can start saving and investing earlier? How do they start taking advantage of the 401ks, 403bs, annuities? How can they start investing in those early enough so that if they do happen to step out of the workforce or reduce their hours and become more full-time caregivers, those early decisions they've taken will ensure that they are able to withstand some of these financial shocks that are likely to happen. It just makes them a lot more resilient when they have emergency savings, where they have been able to invest early, taking advantage of those retirement tools, and have been able to involve more family members, right, in having support of parents or of younger children over the course of their lives.
Vanessa, something you said stuck out to me. I think you said 34 to 36% you're seeing of sort of this millennial generation is opting out of the workforce. Do you know, or did Edward Jones look into how that compared to other generations?
No, that's a good question. And not specifically, no, but I think that's where we saw what the data was showing. I think there was an expectation, right, that with all the options that people have in the current generation, in younger generations, especially with the age gap, with the wage gap narrowing, we expected that, oh, okay, maybe this will be more similar to what we're seeing with men, or more, we'll have a reduced number of women opting out of the workforce. Instead, we're seeing an increase there. But that's an interesting question, Kirsten. I think we'll have to look into that to find out for sure.
Yeah. Jackie, I know that RBC has specifically studied the caregiving responsibilities in the context of having a loved one who has dementia. What can you tell us about that?
So we conducted a survey with Anne in 2020 that confirmed that women are disproportionately providing care and taking the financial hit when they're dealing with, aging parents that might have some dementia, and quite honestly, or having some cognitive decline themselves. So, part of the thing that we want to look at is, obviously we want to support the client every step along the way. And so, to Vanessa's point, whereas if we can educate the importance of, saving for your own retirement, making sure that you are in a safe and kind of position for your retirement on your own. But then when you start looking at some of this caregiving, and, there's some statistics that show that, people are taking money from their own savings to help for that, caregiving, and it might be even, a little less than $1,000 a month. So we're kind of looking at this saying, if women are primarily doing most of or the majority of the caregiving for, aging parents or even their young children, right?
Right.
As they get into that phase where they're entering into retirement or thinking about retirement, whether that be, they haven't necessarily been fully engaged in that financial planning process because they were busy doing the caregiving, or if there is a divorce, unfortunately, or if there is a death in the family, right? Now, all of a sudden, some of these things are happening right around that time that they're entering or getting closer to that retirement date. In addition to that, if we see any kind of, mental decline, we need to address that, right? So we need to know some of the things to kind of look for when we're dealing with some of our clients. I had a perfect example of one of my clients that I've been working with for years. And thankfully, we had trusted contact on the account because she started displaying some signs of cognitive decline. And it was, maybe some of the same stories being repeated. But fortunately, I was able to then make a phone call to a trusted contact to just, broach the subject to say, I'm seeing some things that just aren't necessarily in line with where your mother had been, even a year ago. And sure enough, she did some testing and came back that she was starting to have some early onset of dementia. So I think that, again, is the more as we as financial advisors can, really try to understand our clients, really try to, start working with them earlier on, because then we can kind of help set them up for a comfortable retirement on their own, but also educate them a little bit about, what the impact of having a separation from work means to their financial plan. I mean, that also impacts their Social Security benefits, right? So, and, as we talked about funding a 401k and how much less they might have in their retirement plan, but yet these are the people that are living longer and also might be a little bit more willing to dip into their savings to help their loved ones.
Yeah. Jackie, I know you mentioned, because you are an active advisor, that, you had seen this play out and you were able to have a trusted contact. I'm wondering, when you when you were on the front end, how blunt were you with a client about getting that trusted contact, about saying, did you mention things like dementia, or did you approach it in a different way? I'm just wondering how clients react to that. I mean, in some ways, it's a very, it's almost like a mortal threat to us, right? But it's coming for all of us in some way, right? So I'm just
Exactly. We
wondering
don't want to talk
how you
about it
approach
because
that.
no, that's
Yeah.
a great question, Kirsten. And, quite honestly, again, it's more of a compassion story. So usually we can use a story from the past, right, to kind of say the only reason that we're asking for this information is really just to protect you, right? So that if we ever were to see something that didn't feel right, we would have somebody that we could go to on your behalf. And again, this is something that, it's not somebody that can come and take money out of the portfolio, right? This is just somebody that we can go to if we're having any concerns about behavior that we're seeing that you're displaying. And it doesn't mean that, we hope to never have to use it, but
Right.
it is that peace of mind to know that we have kind of a second set of eyes and a second set of ears that we can go to if we have any concerns. So we do have to be a little blunt, but we can do it in a very compassionate way. Yeah.
And are most clients receptive to that?
I would say almost 100% of our clients are receptive to
Okay.
that. Again, I think, especially with our female clients, they like to know that there's somebody else that we can go to if there is some concerns. I think, I will say there's maybe a few more male clients that maybe have a little bit more objective, they just don't feel as comfortable. But again, I think most of our clients are seeing that there is a true need to have a trusted contact on all of the accounts.
Yeah. Such an interesting perspective too.
Yeah.
I can tell from both of you that caregiving obviously has a huge impact about what's facing women, but what does industry know about other impacts for either of you?
Yeah, Kirsten, I can jump in. And first of all, I did want to double down on what Jackie said in terms of,
Yeah.
what our industry does to really help our senior clients be prepared, right, for some of these things that we know are more age-related, like, cognitive decline. And Edward Jones, our financial advisors, work very closely to know their clients. So having that one-on-one relationship with a financial advisor cannot be overemphasized, because that person knows you, they get you, they want to do what's best for you, they know who your beneficiaries are or your trusted contacts are, like Jackie said. And we've got teams that we call them the senior client protection teams, that are really just focused on making sure that all our clients, but most especially our senior clients who might be more vulnerable to scams, and we can see a proliferation of those types of things. And especially for our women clients who are likely to be living on their own after a certain age, especially after the age of 65, but more so even after the age of 85, they're more likely to be on their own. And unfortunately, sometimes could be a little bit more vulnerable to some of these scams that we all know about. So the industry has definitely, doubled down and focused really on helping our clients feel protected and feel that they are cared for. But Kirsten, in terms of your question, the other impacts we see, of course, in addition to the lower retirement savings accounts, I would say is financial education, so the lack thereof of financial education. Jackie, you already mentioned it, and I don't know that any of us would say that financial education is the panacea for solving all financial issues, but it truly is a foundation for making sure that people have those basic skills and knowledge that they need to make financial decisions. And we see that more so. We think it's important to start now with the younger generations. At Edward Jones, we crossed the threshold of having 1 million learners go through our financial fitness program by the end of 2025. And we've done that early. And again, it's still the starting point. There's so much more that we can do. But even for our older clients, you find like women in my mom's generation, as an example, my mom is 80. My dad passed away at the age of 89 last year. And he was the one that took the lead role in their financial planning. And, right now my mom is on her own, and it's kind of just navigating through, well, what does it mean to just be in charge of finances? Because that's not something that she's had to do really or pay too much attention to in the past. And so financial education for people across all generations is really, really important. And then the second thing I would point out is this whole idea of well-being. And well-being is a package. If you don't have financial confidence or you don't feel you have financial resilience, that's going to have a negative impact on your health. We all know that financial insecurity does cause stress, and stress impacts your physical well-being. It impacts your mental well-being. But it's great to see that even from an employer's perspective, more companies are having a focus on mental health for all populations, but especially for those who are more likely to be vulnerable. So I would say we can't talk about financial security in isolation, because there are certainly other impacts that are going to influence how people feel when they retire, or the confidence levels that they have, if they have good health, if they have a good financial plan.
Jackie, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% kind of needs to be a focus. Again, the more that we can kind of walk alongside our clients, really fully understand what is their top goals in life, and just making sure that we're kind of educating, like if you are on track to achieve those goals. And if not, I mean, we have a tool called the Wealth Plan, which we can plug in all of our clients' investable assets. We put in, some of their life assets like a house. And then we put in goals, right? So if you want to retire at age 65 and, you want to be able to continue your same style of life, but maybe do a little bit more travel, some charitable giving, a legacy to your family, we can actually show them if they're on track to do all those things. The other nice thing that we can do is if they start taking care of younger children or helping out aging parents, we can also show how that impacts their financial plan, right? So it's a very powerful tool to kind of show that, it somewhat puts you in control, right? You're in control of pulling some of those different levers and making some kind of educated decisions on what is best to make sure that you still stay on track to accomplish all those things that were important to you in your lifetime. And, I think going back to what Vanessa said too, as far as, this whole risk prevention, that is so important as well. So RBC has a very strong area because, as we all know, everybody is at a little bit of a greater risk of some kind of a fraud or scam, right? And sadly, I would assume most of us have some example of how that's impacted either a family member or a friend. Sadly, I've had a couple of clients that have been impacted by this. And, some I can talk them through it and we can identify it. Some have been so kind of ingrained in it that they don't even want to admit that this was happening, right? And I had one client call after the fact in tears, apologizing for lying to me, because I asked very pointed questions as to where the money was going, why the money was needed. And she wasn't, truthful because she was being coached on what to say. And so I think the more we can also educate about that, very simplistically to our clients to say, these are some red flags. These are things to watch out for. And it's not your fault. I mean, they are getting very, very crafty, but boy, we don't want anybody to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I know from the regulator's perspective, that's definitely something we see. These scammers are professional, skilled emotional manipulators. They tell, their targets exactly what that target needs to hear. They, as you know, they coach them through, when the bank says this and they start asking these questions, this is the answer you give. When your financial advisor seems confused, this is the answer you give.
Right.
And that that shame in reporting is something we try to, just when it gets reported to our office, usually in an attempt to do something about it, involving the other person. There's not a lot we can do, when the money is gone, but, gets reported to our office. We spend a lot of time trying to affirm for people that this is incredibly common, and they, scammers target, right, what's the biggest bang for your buck? People who have the most accumulated wealth, which is seniors, just based on the amount of time that they've been working, whether men or women. And it's not always a lack of, understanding of how the world is working, right? It's not because you're old, as it were. These people tell you exactly what you need to hear in order to get you to let go of your money. And I think sometimes women's, I don't know that it's nature, but we're certainly socialized, right, to do a lot more taking care of people. And so sometimes that emotional space can make women more vulnerable. It's certainly
Well,
something.
that's a great point. I think the other thing that we have noted is, even somebody that's lost a spouse, right? They're a little bit more lonely. And so they are probably a little bit more at risk because whether it's a romance scam or just somebody that's kind of acting like they care, right? And we've even seen it, unfortunately, where it's a family member. It's somebody that they trust or feel they should trust that are taking advantage of them as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's turn our discussion to some of the, opportunities where firms are helping women, address some of these issues. So, what some of the data points and the knowledge that we've been talking about, maybe Jackie, you can share with us how RBC is helping their women clients prepare.
Yeah, so we have a lot of tools. I think one of the ones that I love using with my women clients is Women in Wealth. And it really kind of goes through the many different aspects, but I think it puts it in a term where women can really feel like they're being heard, right? We're trying to learn how to speak their language and meet them where they're at. Because again, if we're not or haven't, when we were going through grade school, really educated people on money management or even just kind of financial planning tools or even, how to save money, right? Now we're coming at them kind of, and hopefully we're catching them early. So we're doing that through the whole accumulation phase, because I think we have the greatest impact when we start working with our women clients early. But even if we're starting to work with them as they're kind of in that mid phase of the accumulation or towards the end phase of it, it is really trying to understand how they think about money so we can use some of that same language so that they're understanding what we're saying. Because as we know, the more that they're understanding what we're saying, the more likely they are to kind of follow our advice. And as we know, as we're giving them good advice, if you take our advice and, kind of trust that we're guiding you down that path, because again, life does not stop at retirement. That's when it kind of starts and we start taking money out. It's called the distribution phase is what we like to refer to it. But if somebody's retiring at age 65 and we have women living till 94, I mean, that is a long time that we have to plan for that retirement journey, right? And so, or that next phase of life. And in most cases, our clients also want to leave some kind of a meaningful legacy to their family members. That's very important for women. So we need to make sure that we're educating on all these pieces and what that looks like for them, so that again, they can make choices on how much they're going to spend, how much they're going to share with others as far as charitable giving, and then how much we need to kind of allocate. That also helps kind of determine what your asset allocation is too, right? We kind of can back into, okay, if you need X amount of return, that can kind of help us determine what kind of asset allocation we need to design for their portfolio as well.
Jackie, is that something that RBC is doing on a firm level? Is that something you're getting just through, your own continuing education efforts as an advisor?
Yeah, we have a great kind of wealth management and consultants that we can use in that kind of planning process. I'm a certified financial planner, so I kind of use that as part of my practice just because that's part of my DNA. But we have a lot of financial advisors that, will lean on our different areas to kind of help tell that story. And it is, as I mentioned earlier, we have this wealth planning tool that's just been a fantastic tool, and it's interactive. So we can also have our clients play around with what we call the play zone. So they have access to it through our online portal that they can, securely log into. And it's interesting, we get a little notification. So, I know when markets are down, sometimes I know exactly what clients are probably going to go in and test their wealth plan to see if they're still on track, right?
Yeah.
Or, if they're maybe looking at buying a house, I can put in a new house and they can play around with how much of a house they can afford in the plan and when it starts to impact the success of their financial plan. So these are really great tools that are available to all of our RBC advisors to help with their managing client relationships.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah.
Vanessa, I know you've said a couple of times that Edward Jones has identified, financial education specifically as a gap that it can fill. I wonder if you can tell us, what does that look like? If I'm just a retail investor and I'm looking, to take my business, what would I get at Edward Jones? How would that help?
Yes,
Making available.
yes, certainly, Kirsten. So first of all, we have very similar tools to what Jackie has just shared. I think it's really important to have the most up-to-date technology, which we do have, to really know your customer. Nothing beats that one-on-one relationship where you get to ask them questions. What does money mean for you? Tell me about what money meant to you while you were growing up. What were your experiences? So having that deep understanding of who our clients are really helps us tailor the solutions to, whatever their goals are, whether it's retiring, on some sunny island or traveling the world, or their children or grandchildren's education, leaving a legacy. Jackie, you've already mentioned a lot of those. So truly understanding our clients, that know your customer piece is significant. And we have all those tools that can help our financial advisors build that deep trusted relationship with our clients. On the financial education piece, again, that applies to everyone. It applies to many of our clients. It applies to our clients' children, or people who are just general, either investors or don't have any idea about, what does it mean to have a budget? What does it mean to have compound interest? Some of those really either basic or more, I would say, medium level type knowledge. The financial education program really is a free resource that people can go to and find out more. So it's on our website. As I've said, we've had about 1 million learners go through that financial fitness program, which we put together in partnership with Everfi. But anyone is free to go out there and build their knowledge on how to make better financial decisions. And age is just a number. It doesn't matter if you're 14, it doesn't matter if you're 80. It's never too late to learn that importance, because once you have that foundational knowledge, it's easier to be able to know that, oh, okay, I can go and get a financial advisor. I don't have to be wealthy. And I think sometimes that's a misconception, that people need to have a certain amount in order to build a relationship or to have a relationship with a financial advisor. Anybody, who has that desire to start, whether with dollar cost averaging, can go to a financial advisor, because in 20 years' time, you would have developed a significant portfolio and diversified your investments. And again, giving yourself a much better chance to be more confident financially in the future.
And Vanessa, we just I normally would save Q&A to the end, but this was specifically on topic.
Yeah.
Can you just state again what the name of the Edward Jones
Yes,
program is?
of course. It's the Edward Jones Financial Fitness Program. So think about, going to the gym, but this is just specifically related to financial education, and it's a free resource for anyone to take advantage of.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when I started my own sort of journey on this, I had a grandmother who was the master of her finances right up until she died in her late 80s. So I knew that I needed one, and I'm, was an early young professional, and I'm sort of trying to figure out what to do. I'm like, I know I need to invest early. That's important. And, it wasn't until my first financial advisor retired, I'm trained as an attorney, that I realized that he had made an assumption, which I never corrected, which was that I knew a lot more than I did. I knew I needed him, but I didn't really know what for, or all the ways in which I could have helped myself too, in those early years. And so, then as I was transitioning to a no advisor, I was going, wait a second, he's asking me questions in a different way. And I'm thinking, I don't know. Like, I don't know some of this stuff at all. And I think partly that was, again, an assumption just based on how much education I had, that would have included a certain level of, financial understanding about the world that I just did not have. And so I think sometimes just having the space with an advisor to be able to admit that, you want to create that room, I think is really important, and having tools that you could access on your own outside of that financial advisor relationship also is really, really helpful. Jack, you know that RBC has an internal group. You mentioned WAFA, the Women's Association of Financial Advisors, that support specifically the advisor professionals. You're the president of that. I wonder if you could just tell us more about, their aims at RBC, kind of what do they do that does support those advisors?
So this is a group that has been in existence at RBC for a little over 30 years. So, and
Wow.
it really was kind of, a little bit of an effort, as because women advisors, obviously we are not 50% of the population. I wish we could say we are as financial advisors, but we're not. We're a smaller percentage, and we're trying to grow that percentage. So the original intent, I think, was just to offer support to other women advisors within the organization, share ideas, support one another. And it really has kind of grown from there. I mean, right now, WAFA, as I call it, we're enthusiastic adopters of anything that can support the client advisor relationship. And I think that goes for both, men and women, quite frankly. We look at any kind of things that can enhance that relationship and help bring that to the firm. So I think we are also a great sounding board. We have a great ear to our executive committee and our executives within RBC. They really appreciate kind of our feedback. But we're, really trying to support our fellow advisors. We're trying to recruit other women advisors, obviously, at RBC, because we always want to have more friends at the table. But really, it is just making sure that if there is something that's working, we share it with the group, right? And that has been so helpful for my practice. It helps build confidence. You learn different things in different ways. And this group is not holding anything back. They're kind of sharing everything. We have a lot of mentorship groups, which has been super helpful as well. Some where we're financial advisors that are just getting started, and then some that financial advisors that have been in the business for over 20 some years, right? Just recently, we've gotten a few more branch directors like myself. So we formed a mentorship group to support our, women branch directors that are starting in the business or starting within RBC. So it's just a group that's really meant to kind of bring awareness to different things, again, that can enhance the advisor-client relationship, can also improve the tools and services that we have within RBC. So again, we can kind of just add value to that relationship with the client.
So Jackie, can I just pile on to that?
Yeah.
Because, at Edward Jones, we have a similar group. And just yesterday, we had a session. Again, it's Women's History Month, but we had a session where 1,400 people attended, where they were just listening in and learning about people's experiences, women who are financial advisors and are just starting out, and what their unique challenges were. And I think that's something that we can't stop doing until maybe we get to parity at some point. There's still so much that we need to do as an industry to encourage more women to consider the financial advisor role. And that's an opportunity that continues to grow at Edward Jones. We're about 23% women financial advisors now, which is progress, that we've made over the last few decades. And I think as an industry, we have an opportunity to do so much more. So I'm excited to see, our firm and your firm continue to make that difference in the industry, because it's working. It really is. And the other thing I would say, I'm really happy that with so many companies, they've looked across the board and done pay equity studies, right, to make sure that people they look at people's compensations in a fair way, and that's something that many companies have done, and it's working, because these decisions will have an impact on women's financial outcomes right now and in the future. There's just so much we can do. I think about the automatic enrollment into 401ks that many organizations have as a matter of course now. When people are automatically opt in to a retirement savings plan, they're 20 times more likely to participate, right? 20 times. And that makes a difference in 20, in 30 years' time, especially as we see longevity become, I wouldn't say more of an issue, it's more of a blessing. So how do we prepare for that?
Oh, that's interesting. I was just thinking, I serve as a director on a local nonprofit, and we changed to the automatic opt-in. And it's so interesting. The new employees who were automatically opted in gave their contributions were in every instance in excess of what we were matching. Whereas before we were seeing some people weren't even they're leaving money on the table from what we offer as a match, but when they were automatically enrolled, every one of them, opted to contribute even more. And I think this was a really good decision. It was made financial sense, right, for the board to do that, but also just, as an observation of the world. Yeah.
That's a great point. There's a piece that kind of shows, if you start saving at 32 versus 22, the significant difference that makes when you hit retirement. So,
yeah. Time in the market, right, Jackie?
Yes. That time.
Well, we are kind of approaching the Q&A, so I want to invite people to do that. We have more, materials we can continue to go through. We do have a couple of questions in here, though. The first one is, and I'll just let either one of you take it, whoever chimes in first, maybe. What's the best advice that you can give a single woman who's 50 plus years old and has just started with her financial plan?
I can take that. I think again, really it is sitting down with somebody that you can trust, really working through and understanding your, income, your outflow, right? So that we can kind of look to see, okay, where is, what's coming in, what's going out, how much of that can we carve out for your retirement savings? How much is your Social Security benefit going to, impact your income in retirement? And then looking at any changes that we have to make to kind of the client behavior. And what I mean by that is there's many levers, as far as the market returns that we really don't have as many control over, right? That's a harder thing to control, but your saving strategies, how you're investing that money matters, how you're spending money, and kind of when you decide to retire, that all does matter. So I think it's really starting to kind of work and get laser focused on what you need to do to get you to where you want to be. And quite frankly, it might be that answer that you might have to work a couple extra years just to get you into a little bit more secure financial footing so that your retirement feels a little bit more secure. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to give you, a little bit more financial freedom, as we talked about before. And once you have that peace of mind, so that hopefully, again, you can focus on the things that are important, your health, your family, your friends, your community. Yeah.
Vanessa, anything you want to add?
No, that's, again, Jackie's the quintessential financial advisor. That's exactly what I would have said. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, imagines that there might be different outcomes between older women who were in heterosexual relationships versus same-sex relationships. And I would add to that women who aren't in a relationship, who are single income for the majority of their lives. Do you have any insight on how those differences affect financial circumstances that women face later in life?
Yeah, again, so I think that is just all planning, right? So it's looking at kind of the different income sources that you have, the different saving strategies that both people have done, and if those assets are being combined or if we're running two totally individual plans. So, that's part of the conversation that we have to have with our clients to see kind of what the impact is and how that kind of comes together. And even, we've had a lot of situations where, clients, there's divorce too, right? So all of a sudden, you had this unit that was working together for their financial plan. And now all of a sudden you basically cut it in half, right? And you're now planning for two retirements that are probably going to have to look a little bit differently. So again, I think it's very specific to everybody's individual scenario. And that's where we need to kind of sit down and develop kind of a very personal wealth plan for each individual or each couple that we're dealing with. Yeah.
So, and Jackie, that's the same similar perspective to what we would have at Edward Jones. Everyone has a unique story. Yeah, okay, granted that there's some people who have very similar circumstances and maybe you have a similar plan to them. But when you look across different demographics, some people are more vulnerable to certain health issues versus others. So everyone needs to have a unique plan. And as a financial advisor, understanding their unique circumstances and putting together this customized approach is something that we expect to do with each and every one of our clients. The other thing I would say related to this question is that I don't think we can overemphasize the importance of having a community, right? Whatever circumstances we're going through, whatever our story is, how do we make sure that we build out our village as women specifically, as we think about how we want to retire later on in life. Going back to caregiving, where women tend to be the ones who are providing caregiving circumstances or caregiving situations. What are some of those things that we could do to make sure other siblings are involved, right? Because again, it falls mainly on women. Many women like me have brothers. Why aren't they part of the story? So how do we include them in this conversation? How do we ensure that we have a village, whether you're aging as a single woman or you're aging in a couple, whatever kind of couple you're in, how do we have that unique approach to your circumstances?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. You'll see the continuing ed code is up on screen. It's 200741. Our next question had to do with whether you would inform clients, female clients, on the benefits of waiting longer to take Social Security, and to which I would also add, what are you informing them with regard to that issue?
So on that, I would say it's also very plan-based, right? So it kind of depends on what investable assets they have. So if they have enough assets to kind of fill that gap from maybe taking Social Security early or waiting till full retirement age or waiting till you get the maximum credits, because again, that's a 34% higher benefit if you wait. So that can mean a lot. Then we'd have to take into consideration, if it's a couple, who is the higher wage earner and when does that make the most sense? In this wealth plan, though, there is a really good tool that kind of shows that math for them, right? So it will show the break even if we decide to start taking, early, where is that break even, or if we wait. And then it actually shows the total dollar amount if you live to, age 94, 92. So that's super helpful because I think a lot of times, clients would just say, well, I want to take it as soon as possible. Why wouldn't I, right? Because then I get that benefit. But again, you are leaving some money on the table if you're living a full life or past life expectancy, close to life expectancy. So that has been just a really good visual to show our clients. But then again, we do have to look at all the different circumstances. If they need the money and they need to retire early, we're going to probably need to, weigh a little heavier on what that Social Security benefit is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What would you say to women who have saved diligently their entire working careers, but now they are having to make that transition from saver to spender in retirement? How do you help them get into that mode?
So I think this is just a fascinating topic. I've been doing this for, a little over 28 years at RBC. And to me, that transition from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase, it's not easy. Because in addition to that, we're also hitting that date where we say retirement, right? And so there's many different components to it. So I think you have to come with a lot of compassion to our clients, but showing them, this kind of tool, this wealth plan tool that says, this is why we save the money. Like now you've hit that next phase of life and this is what you're supposed to do. Now, the more that they have community support, friends and family, and quite frankly, good health, they're probably going to be able to enjoy that kind of transition maybe a little bit better. We somewhat break ours out into, we call the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So it just kind of shows them, right away, maybe that first 10 years, you're probably going to be a little bit more active, probably going to want to spend a little bit more money. And it gives them the freedom to do that. Again, we've planned for this. This is what we're anticipating. But then it's also kind of those guardrails to say, are you spending a little too much? Or, I have some clients that they're at that 99 percentile probability of success. And I always tell them there is no 100s. There's no guarantee. There's no 100s.
That is the high A.
That's a very high A. And quite frankly, it might even show you're a little oversaved for retirement. That's not a bad thing, but it just means that hopefully you have some really big legacy goals, because somebody's going to get a really nice legacy. I always put it this way, you can choose to fly first class, or your children will, or your loved ones will, right? And you get to make that decision. So, yeah.
So, Jackie, can I just add on to that? Because we have a similar conversations with our clients at Edward Jones, especially those, that this attendee has asked. So we have our clients think about it in four ways, health, finance, family, and purpose. So you saved and invested diligently all this while. What's your purpose, right? Because maybe family is good, health is great, your finances are in order, but what's your purpose? And it's really been fascinating seeing how that education around purpose has helped people live their best lives. And I think that's such an important, but as you said, such an important conversation with clients, but the empathy that we need to be able to help our clients navigate through this situation is much needed. That EQ and IQ combined is essential when we're walking through with them. So, but you said that brilliantly.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to our next question, which I think both of you have kind of touched on, and we are getting towards the end. But what suggestions do you have for women to increase investing to maximize their contributions, since we're looking at predictions that women might, live to around 100?
Nessa, do you want me to take that one?
Yes, please.
Sure. So, really, again, I think it is understanding what's coming in and what's going out and what adjustments that we can make. So at the end of the day, I think what people will realize is if you're saving into a 401k, and that money is going in pre-tax, right? You're not necessarily seeing that direct impact in your paycheck. I mean, it's, you're seeing a little bit of an impact, but if you start doing that right away, you really don't feel it. We're having conversations about the Roth 401k and the benefits of that, depending on where your income is and where you are on the savings spectrum. But I think really it is just kind of looking at I don't like to call it budget. I like to call it a spending plan, because that seems like a little bit more positive skew on it. But if you really look at your spending plan, I think all of us can probably find some areas that maybe we could pare back a little bit if that's important to us, to kind of set us up for a little bit more comfortable retirement or distribution phase. So it's just finding those little areas where we can maybe just tuck a little bit more money away. And then quite frankly, making sure that that money is kind of working for us. The best compounder is obviously time. So the earlier we can do it, the better. But even if we're starting to work with somebody, in their mid 50s to late 50s, that can kind of be that little catch-up period, right? Now, maybe your children are educated and there's no more college tuition payments or whatever that was, so that you have the ability maybe to stick a little bit more money away, and we help them find that.
Thank you. This next question was about whether, if is there any research that shows whether women tend to care more than men, for example, about leaving bequeathments, going back to purpose or legacy?
The statistics
I don't have. Oh, Jackie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I've seen that, women do have a little bit more desire to leave a legacy for their loved ones. That's just a little bit more of what they kind of put as their purpose and their kind of values. But Go ahead, Vanessa.
No, I was going to say, Jackie, that I haven't seen the data that says that for sure. So, but I know there's maybe anecdotal evidence, but what we have found is that the donor advised funds are becoming very popular with our clients because it does allow them to, leave a legacy or, provide their charitable donations in a very streamlined way. So that seems to have been very well received, across the board when it comes to our clients.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate the questions that have come in that we've been able to get to. I just want to give a quick plug again that there's a part 3 of this webinar series that NASAA Senior Issues has been presenting. That'll be next Wednesday, same time, same place. You can register again, and they'll talk about the building knowledge and gaining confidence and empowering women investors. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lonnie. I think he was going to throw up the CE code one more time. Please take our survey, all of that. There it is. Thank you.
Yep.
200741.